Hello everyone. This video we are going to read through Ether, a new model for money, the first big article that I ever wrote. And I hope that these video readings of these are a useful way for people to internalize articles. Not everyone likes to read. Most people like me like to have the information spoon-fed to them. And so I am spoon-feeding you this article right into your ear holes and eye holes. So here we go. This article explores Ether's role as an asset in Ethereum. Using data from the last 2 years of the Ethereum economy, I propose a novel definition for understanding Ether, the asset. Bandwidth for permissionlessness inside of Ethereum. This article is summarized in the following 2 paragraphs. Ethereum is a foundation for building an alternative internet-based financial system. This financial system has the capacity to be completely open and trustless. This new financial system needs a native money to operate. Financial applications in this new landscape need a trustless form of collateral for their operation, and the only truly trustless asset on Ethereum is Ether. As a result of this demand, Ether has become an economic trifecta, a triple point asset satisfying all the requirements that a new economy needs all at once. As a result of this, Ether has become the best model for money that the world has ever come up with. If you want to watch or hear me give this talk, a 23-minute video at Tel Aviv Ethereal back in 2019, that video is also useful. A lot of this, it's going to be the same information, just in 2 different forms. In this analysis, in this article, there are 2 assumptions of Ether and Ethereum. The first is that Ethereum 2.0 is alive and well, and proof of stake is a real thing. And EIP 1559 has been submitted and implemented, which burns the bulk of the transaction fee, like 90+%, and then the remaining little bit is just a tip paid to the validators. So this article assumes that those 2 things are working. So this article is going to be separated into 3 categories. So there's part 1, there's 3 parts. There's going to be part 1, which is defining Ethereum. And then part 2 is defining asset classes, like what are the various asset classes that all assets fit into. And then part 3 is kind of wrapping those 2 things together. So we define Ethereum, we define asset classes, and then we define Ether in Ethereum. You need to start at the beginning, right? So we need to define the things that Ether lives inside of, which is Ethereum and which lives inside of the internet. So we're building up to a definition. So that's what we're getting to. So part 1, defining Ethereum. Before we define Ether, we need to define Ethereum. Ether will be defined by how Ethereum is used. Defining Ethereum has also been difficult. Attempting to define Ethereum feels a bit like defining the internet in the 80s. No one really knows what is coming. The cool thing about open source technology is that the use and application of the technology evolves and emerges as the community builds and discovers its best use case. Applications define the internet. If you ask Google to define the internet, you will get this answer. A global computer network providing a variety of information and communication facilities consisting of interconnected networks using standardized communication protocols. Personally, I don't think that this definition is very helpful. It is technically right, but it is a definition meant for the technically minded. If you were to ask, how is the internet, or how does the internet impact humanity, we need to look at what we are doing when we are on the internet for the majority of the time. Which brings us to these: Facebook, Instagram, Google, Wikipedia, YouTube, Netflix, Twitch, Reddit. These are the things that we do on the internet. This is what the internet is for us. It is how we use it. The internet itself is a stack of different technologies with applications at the very top. While the internet cannot exist without any one part of the stack, it is the application layer of the internet that defines how the internet meaningfully impacts our lives. All the layers below the application layer are a means to an end, to provide products and services to the people. So this is a little illustration. This is the internet network stack. This is how the internet is built upon each other to produce the end result, which is the browser, right? The browser is this UI for viewing the internet, for viewing the applications in the internet. The missing layer, value. The innovation behind the internet was to make data cheap, available, and infinitely copyable. This innovation opened up the world to abundant and cheap information, and humanity is better because of it. However, cheap, available, and copyable is the opposite of what money and value are. Money and value are by definition scarce, expensive, and difficult to access. When Bitcoin solved the internet's double spend problem, it achieved creating internet scarcity. For the first time ever, when you sent something on the internet, you could no longer keep it for yourself. However, with Bitcoin, this is only true if you are sending Bitcoins. The Bitcoin protocol only provides scarcity to Bitcoins, nothing else. This is where Ethereum comes in, a platform for providing digital scarcity for any digital asset. Ethereum gives the power of digital scarcity to more than just its own native currency. Because of Ethereum, digital scarcity can be made for any asset found on its platform. Tokenization and the ERC20 standard is the printing press for digital scarcity. As a result, Ethereum has become the asset-agnostic settlement layer for the internet. Ethereum exists as a new layer on the internet. It uses the communication protocols below it to create a new network that defines how digital value is managed. Ethereum is the value layer of the internet stack. So in this image, there is the old tech stack, the tech stack that we use when you are using to watch YouTube right now. And then in this new internet, there's this new stack. There's this new layer that is being interjected in the middle of the internet, which is the Ethereum layer, the value layer, the value transport layer, the settlement layer of the internet, the value layer of the internet, where value is settled. If you go to ethereum.org, you will find the following definition for Ethereum. Ethereum is a global open source platform for decentralized applications. On Ethereum, you can write code that controls digital value, runs exactly as programmed, and is accessible anywhere in the world. The applications on the internet define what the internet is. Likewise, the applications on Ethereum will define what Ethereum is. Ethereum's application layer. The revolution of Ethereum is the establishment of a new application layer on the internet. The Internet of Web 2 is the internet of centralized databases and centralized data. Facebook, Google, Amazon, and their products represent the big applications of Web 2. Ethereum provides an alternative, a new layer, a value layer that allows for new applications. While the Internet of Web 2 is saturated and dominated by gargantuans, Web 3 provides an unclaimed landscape of potential value applications. So this series of graphics, which actually could be updated because we have two more graphics from Ethereal network that are the continuation of this growth of DeFi. I compare that to the growth of the network of the internet, the ARPANET back in like the 60s, 70s, 80s. And so like as nodes are being added and connections are being added, there's more transactional capacity. In one, it's transactional via data. The other one is transactional via value. But the growth looks the same, the growth of this network. The financial applications found on top of Ethereum have begun to dominate the application landscape. Led by MakerDAO and the establishment of permissionless stability from DAI, Ethereum's permissionless financial network has exploded. Open finance on Ethereum has begun to lock in Ethereum as a global value settlement platform. The open finance movement that started as a curiosity in 2018 has erupted into what is perhaps Ethereum's main purpose, a network for permissionless applications and services. Ethereum's open finance landscape spawns horizontally across the internet of value. Each application is able to be composed with others, generating endless permutations of transactions between each app. However, Ethereum is not a flat landscape. Financial systems and economies are inherently stratified, and Ethereum is no exception. With the base blockchain at the bottom, Ethereum's applications have stratified themselves in a way that maps onto the legacy financial system. The money is always at the base of every financial system. Gold is a great permissionless store of value, except that it is heavy, tangible, and capturable. 90% of the world's gold has been captured by the central banks, and the financial products and services below these central banks have all been relegated to the fiat money that central banks put out. Because of the capturability of gold, each financial layer under the Federal Reserve must ask permission to the layer above it, because it's the layer above it that has the money. So this image is an example of the stratification of Ethereum. At the base is always the blockchain, right? The base layer is always the chain. Somewhere very close to the base layer is MakerDAO, where stability comes from. And then we have borrowing and lending services. And then we have applications. And then we have like the user aggregation layer, which is these apps that bring in many, many users. And they use the infrastructure of apps below it to provide services to their users. And then those applications use the lending and borrowing networks, which use Maker, which uses Ethereum. This image is an image I made that kind of compares these two structures of the two financial systems. There's really no reason for Ethereum to be upside down or for the traditional pyramid to be right side up or whatever, but it's a stylistic choice that I think represents the differences between these two systems, right? Because the old world is a very top-down system. It's a trickle-down economy. It's the Federal Reserve manages interest rates to impact the rest of the world in this trickle-down way. Whereas with Ethereum, everything is based off of Ether. Everything is based off of the Ethereum blockchain. Things use the Ethereum blockchain as a foundation to move upwards. And so it's a bottom-up economy. This hopefully illustrates the role of a permissionless, programmable store of value money at the bottom of a new alternative financial stack. Gold is permissionless, and so is Bitcoin. But if the systems that leverage the value of these assets aren't also permissionless, then over time they will capture the asset and generate a permissioned system in which rent seeking is enabled. The idea here is that if you have a permissionless store of value like Bitcoin, that's great. But if the institutions that leverage the value in Bitcoin are themselves permissioned, then we really haven't solved any problems. It's a step in the right direction, but you need to have both a permissionless store of value and permissionless applications in order to fully capture the value of a permissionless decentralized world. So stitching it together. If you have so far believed in my illustration of Ethereum thus far, here's how I define it. Ethereum is the internet of value, the internet native global settlement layer for digital assets, a landscape of permissionless financial applications which together support a permissionless economy. So now we're on to part 2, which is defining Ether, which requires defining asset classes. Ether as an asset has been difficult to pin down. The maximal flexibility offered by a Turing-complete blockchain, Ethereum, means that Ether can truly do anything. This makes defining it inside of the scope of other asset classes difficult. In order to define Ether as an asset, we need to understand what asset classes are. So here's a graphic I pulled from the placeholder blog from Chris Berniski. Really awesome article that you guys should read, which is linked here in the article. I'll link it in the show notes. Who also uses Robert Greer's 1997 paper, What is an Asset Class Anyways, which proposes that there are 3 asset superclasses, he calls them. Capital assets, transformable consumable assets, and store of value assets. So let's get into these. Capital assets are productive assets. They are assets that produce. They produce a source of value. They produce cash, whatever that cash is. Examples include equities. The main goal of a business is to produce cash flow. Bonds over time produce cash for their owner. Rentable real estate. You rent out your house, you get cash. Taxi medallions, you own a taxi medallion and then you can rent it out. You can rent it out to a driver who will then produce cash for you. All of these assets produce cash flow. Then there's transformable consumable assets, which are like commodity assets. I call these one-time use assets. You consume it and you can burn it, and they produce something as a result of that. And so the production of whatever it produces is some sort of economic yield. And so, for example, wheat. You can turn wheat into bread, and bread is better than wheat. You can eat bread. You can't eat wheat. The only thing you can do with wheat is you can turn it into bread or some other product. Oil. You can't actually consume oil. You can't do anything with oil, but you can put it in your car, and your car can take you from your home to your work where you make a business deal or something. Or it goes into the energy in your laptop, which allows you to make a YouTube video that you can monetize. Just examples. And so examples include gold, oil, commodities, or energy. Really, it's energy. It's all about energy. The best example of a commodity asset, a transformable, consumable asset, is energy. You use it up and you are better off from the energy that you got from it. Store of value assets specifically cannot be consumed. Their value persists across space and time, and they are scarce. Examples include gold, currencies, real estate, art, or bitcoins. This is the most simple asset class, but also perhaps the most important. These types of assets must be scarce and hard to produce or duplicate or copy. They should be desirable ubiquitously across the globe. They should be saleable from wherever you are. And they are the assets that benefit from global trust in the perceived value of the asset. So store of value, the best example is gold. You can buy and sell gold anywhere in the world. Art is a good store of value, but only in America, where there are wealthy people who will buy that art from you. If you take your art to India or to some third world country, it's not going to be worth as much. Real estate, really good store of value across time. There's always going to be demand for real estate. So when we are discussing monetary premium is part of the store of value asset classification. Not everything that's the store of value is money, like houses aren't money, art's not money. But if you are talking about something that does have a monetary premium, we are talking about a store of value asset. You may have noticed that some assets fall into more than one category. Real estate properties are great stores of value, but you can also rent them out to generate cash flow. Likewise, gold is an important component in industry products due to its ability to carry electrical signals and its resistance to decay. It has also been the greatest store of value humanity has ever seen until now. Ether, all three asset classes. Ether fits perfectly into all three asset classes. Depending on the context, Ether can be operating as any of the three above asset classes and even all three at once. Ether is a capital asset. In its capital asset form, Ether is a share of the Ethereum network, a claim on Ethereum's fees, and the right to produce work for Ethereum. So first one, Ether is a share in Ethereum. Ethereum's network is a decentralized institution. The Ethereum network produces products and services for its internet of value in an attempt to grow its network, grow its users, and capture more value. The better products and services it creates, such as MakerDAO, Compound, DYDX, Augur, the more customers there are for Ethereum. Ethereum's customers are both the applications found on top of it as well as the users of those applications. For a continuation on this idea, watch the next video in this series called Ether is Equity, where I make the claim that Ether, the price of Ether, directly relates to the value that Ethereum produces for the world. And so that is the 2 of 3 in this series. Ether is a claim on Ethereum's fees. In order to keep the network running, Ethereum needs to pay its workers. These workers come in the form of validators, those that make sure that all the user customers are paying by the terms of service of Ethereum. Ethereum's terms of service is you follow the rules of the EVM, you don't double spend. If you're following the EVM, you're following the terms of service. These fees are paid to the workers for their labor, but also act as a wall that protects Ethereum. The height of the wall is highly correlated with the total fees produced by the network. The height of the wall is the cost of attacking Ethereum. The right to produce work. Owning Ether is owning the right to produce work and to collect the fees of Ethereum. Ether is the mechanism for ensuring incentive alignment between the Ethereum network and its workers. All workers must own ETH in order to provide work for Ethereum. If you want to be an employee of the Ethereum network and be paid for your services, you must own ETH to make sure that you are aligned with the network. These are the components that make Ether a capital asset. When staked, Ether is a productive asset for its owner. Ether produces more of itself for the owner that stakes it and does work for Ethereum. The current ETH 2.0 spec has an issuance schedule that is dynamic. Fewer total ETH stakers mean that the ETH stakers are paid comparatively more. This is to incentivize more ETH stakers to come and provide security to Ethereum. When there are more stakers staking their ETH, Ethereum pays each staker less as more total security is being provided, and therefore security is not as needed. Here is the capital asset return rate based on the different numbers of ETH being staked. And so what that last part was about was talking about the dynamic between the U-shaped dynamic between return and Ether being staked. If there's not much Ether being staked, Ethereum isn't very secure. And so if there's not much Ether being staked, Ethereum is issuing more Ether to the stakers as a reward. If other people stop staking, you get paid more as a staker, and vice versa. And so if a lot of people are staking, people are being paid less because clearly we don't need to pay that much anymore because so many people are staking that the security is really high. We can reduce the budget. If security is low, we increase the budget. However, that's not the only way that Ether stakers are paid. The above return rate is just for the issuance of new Ether. Ether stakers are also paid as a proportion of the fees paid to the network. Here are Ethereum's top paying users on September 18th, 2019. So this is kind of old. The fees collected are added on top of the network issuance and paid to the workers of Ethereum. In the 30 days in September 18th of 2019, over a 1 month period, $5 million was paid to Ether validators. Now, EIP 1559 tweaks these numbers. We won't really know what the real world numbers are until 1559 is up and running and we're in proof of stake. All the economics change. But the idea is that there will always be customers of Ethereum's block space who will be paying the validators for serving that need. Okay, asset number 2. Ether is a consumable transformable asset. Consumable transformable assets comes in many forms. The most apparent asset in this class isn't one particular asset itself, but rather a number of assets that produce this thing, and that thing is energy. Energy is a consumable asset that we all use to transform things in the world around us. Energy is how raw earth ore turns into the steel inside of a skyscraper or the frame of a car. Energy is how elevators move people to their office and how we transact and do business on our computers or phones. It is the power behind cargo ships creating worldwide commerce. It is the heat in our ovens that turns raw food into edible meals. Imagine a world without energy. Energy makes the world go round. Without energy, we would not be able to turn useless things into useful things. This demand for an energy substrate is what gives oil its global value, why electric cars are hot topics, and why batteries are so goddamn expensive. Energy is the economic substrate that powers the world economy. Ether is the economic substrate for the internet. Ether's original definition, gas for Ethereum, illustrates this well. The consumption of Ether is the cost of turning the economic wheels inside of Ethereum. At any time any activity is done, Ether is consumed. Anytime an asset is moved, a loan is generated, an exchange is made, a purchase is executed, a DAO started, Ether is consumed. Ether, last one, store value. Ether is a store value asset. If you've ever paid attention to the ETH locked in DeFi metric, you're paying attention to Ether as a store value asset. Being locked is referring to how it is being used as collateral for something. It wouldn't be locked if it didn't have a commitment to act as the value that backs some sort of agreement or contract or asset on Ethereum. Ether, as a permissionless global asset, is the vehicle for generating permissionless financial institutions on Ethereum. We've called these permissionless financial institutions dApps, and the economic network they create DeFi, or open finance. If Ether wasn't permissionless, or if these open finance applications on Ethereum ran on permissioned collateral, such as centralized stablecoins or tokenized gold, then they wouldn't be fully permissionless systems. We would have to trust the centralized institutions that issue the on-chain assets that we would have to trust in the centralized institutions that issue the assets, that the off-chain assets are legit and that they will honor the on-chain redeemability. Thankfully, Ether is permissionless, so we don't have this problem if we use Ether inside of open finance. Hint, we do. Ethereum's first dApp, MakerDAO. The first dApp, not as first as in first in time, but first as in the order of operations, the bottom of the stack. MakerDAO is crucial to the development of open finance on Ethereum. Stability is crucial for finance, and without a stable reference point to Ether, many of the financial applications on Ethereum simply would not be able to operate. Platforms like Compound, DYDX, or SET all require a stable currency in order for their application to function. There are plenty of stablecoins on Ethereum, but there is only one permissionless one. DAI, the only native stablecoin, the only stable cryptocurrency on Ethereum, is the only stablecoin on Ethereum, and it achieves that nativity by being backed by the only trustless asset on Ethereum, Ether. DAI achieves its value by the store of value function of Ether, as well as achieving its permissionlessness from its over-collateralization. So Ether is what makes DAI permissionless. Permissionless stability enables permissionless finance. Having a permissionless stablecoin is really important. In addition to providing a stable foundation to build finance upon, if you want the financial structures on top of that foundation to be permissionless, you need the foundation itself to be permissionless. If all of DeFi ran on USDC, we would all be trusting Circle with their management of our funds. DAI is the only stable stablecoin that cannot be removed, revoked, or burned from a user's wallet via a central authority. This is why open finance applications can get assurances when building their application with DAI. If DAI runs in their application, no central party can disrupt the application or its assets. And all of this is based off of Ether as a permissionless programmable store value asset. Okay, the next application, Compound. Compound Finance is the borrowing lending application for Ethereum. It is a financial primitive and a crucial component in the financial stack of Ethereum. Compound is an application that pools borrowers and lenders together and matches the demand and supply of each party with a variable interest rate. This produces the DAI borrow and DAI supply rates, or the cost of borrowing DAI and the interest received from lending DAI. You can check out rates at loanscan.io. Compound is trustless because of collateral. Collateral is what makes Compound a permissionless platform. Borrowers always must over-collateralize their loan in order for lenders to be given the assurances they need that there's always money in the bank that is going to be available for them to withdraw. In other words, trustlessness. Below is a chart that has two lines. In red, the total value of all collateral locked in Compound denominated in Ether. In purple, the total number of Ether locked as collateral. So the difference between the purple line and the red line is the difference between being Ether as collateral and everything else as collateral. So the difference in those two lines is the everything else part. There's not that much difference. It's mostly Ether. It's basically all Ether. The discrepancy between ETH locked and the total value of locked is a bunch of, that's a caption. Sorry, ignore that. The vast majority of collateral in Compound is Ether. Borrowers are locking up ETH to be the collateral for their loan. In this scenario, Ether is being used as a store of value asset, an asset that is perceived by the market to hold its value across time as the collateral for a permissionless loan. This permissionless collateral is what powers the lending side of Compound, as the Compound application ensures over-collateralization and auto-liquidation of the collateral from borrowers. Lenders don't have to trust borrowers. The Compound application removes trust from the equation. Compound does this via two mechanisms: using Ether as a store of value and using Ether's programmability to enable trust-removed borrowing and lending. DYDX. DYDX is a platform for margin trading, lending, and borrowing. DYDX runs on smart contracts on Ethereum and allows users to trade with no intermediaries. DYDX provides its services to users by requiring a store of value collateral in order to borrow or trade on margin. The collateral could theoretically be anything, and DYDX has enabled USDC as collateral. However, as you can see in the chart below, the vast majority of collateral inside DYDX is Ether. Ether is the primary store of value collateral that is used. The combination of DYDX contracts and a permissionless store of value programmable asset like ETH enable DYDX's permissionlessness and trustlessness as a financial application. Demand inside of DYDX is 94% Ether or DAI, and that counts as 90 together. That just counts as Ether because DAI is just stabilized Ether. Behind the value of DAI is because of the value of Ether. On to Uniswap. Uniswap is 1 part Ether, 1 part any other token. In V1 of Uniswap, all token trading pairs trade against store of value Ether. It's Ether's role as a store of value that makes it such a great collateral for all the token trading pairs to trade against. In version 2 of Uniswap, which just came out yesterday from me reading this, Uniswap will be able to enable any token to any token trading pairs, and I'm willing to bet that the next most used collateral inside of Uniswap will be DAI, which is stabilized Ether. Ether is the store of value for open finance. 10 years after their inception, only one use case for blockchains has been discovered: the permissionless management of value across the internet. Open finance is a new fertile landscape for new financial institutions. In the open finance landscape, institutions are autonomous, humanless contracts on Ethereum. And from what we can see so far in DeFi is that they use Ether as the underlying store of value asset for their application. So here is the net of all DeFi applications. And there's 2 lines here, again, red and purple. Red is the total amount of value locked in DeFi, and then purple is the total amount of ETH locked in DeFi. And so you can see, like, it's all Ether. The whole thing is Ether. There is a small difference that is not Ether, that a decent amount of is DAI, like greater than 50%, somewhere between 50 and 80%. And then the remainder is stuff like USDC or REP or MKR. And, REP and MKR get their value from it being a cash flow service that uses Ether as the cash flow. So it's all Ether. It's all Ether. While I expect further assets to be able to come to open finance and act as collateral, such as more centralized stablecoins, golden vault securities, treasuries, bonds, etc., I expect Ether and DAI will remain the significant majority of collateral for open finance applications. Open finance applications that leverage Ether and DAI are retaining full permissionlessness. If the open finance applications use off-chain trusted assets, then they are acting as a hybrid open finance application with trusted assets, which is fine. It's totally fine. I love to see that happen, but I also would love to see fully permissionless applications that leverage trustless ETH and trustless DAI, which brings us to Ether, the triple point asset. Depending on the context, Ether acts as any of the 3 major asset superclasses. Staked ETH is Ether as a capital asset. Consumed ETH in a transaction is Ether as energy, Ether as a consumable transformable asset, or ETH locked in DeFi, which is ETH as a store of value asset. Ether is the first asset to ever transcend all 3 asset classes. This is great for Ether. Money is something that is by definition flexible. Money is what you need it to be when you need it to be that thing. And Ether fits into all 3 major frameworks for what a valuable asset should be. The story doesn't end here, however. The triple point is a reference to thermodynamics. In thermodynamics, the triple point of a substance is the temperature and pressure at which the 3 phases... I messed up that sentence. Okay. The triple point is where you perfectly balance pressure and temperature for a particular substance so that the liquid, solid, and vapor phase of a substance all intersect. And so here is this going to turn into a GIF? Unfortunately not. So there, if you go to YouTube and type in triple point of water, you will see people's cool different science experiments where water is boiling, freezing, and being a liquid all at the same time, all in the same spot. It's really, really cool. Superfluid collateral in open finance. Okay, so this is getting to the point where we're illustrating how Ether is being all three assets at the same time. And a lot of this came from Dan Ellerter's inspiration, Superfluid Collateral in Open Finance. So I definitely recommend that as a read. So what happens when collateral becomes liquid? Okay, sorry. I'm just kind of catching up with how this got here. Okay, so yeah, again, check out Dan's article. Then this is kind of referencing what Dan was talking about in his article. So here's what Dan was talking about. You can put Ether inside of MakerDAO to produce DAI. Then you can use DAI and Ether to be collateral inside of Uniswap, inside of the DAI Ether trading pool. Now, Uniswap puts out a token. When you add liquidity to Uniswap, you get a token as a receipt that represents your claim on the assets that you deposited. And so for Ether and DAI, you get this token back, and people that are using Uniswap to trade between Ether and DAI are paying fees into the pool, right? And so Ether is acting as a capital asset there, after it's also acting as a capital asset inside of staking. So it's acting as a capital asset inside Uniswap as well. So it produces this token. And so then you can put that token, in theory, inside of Compound. And then you can use that capital asset store of value inside of Compound to act as another store of value. So the main point that Dan was making in his article is that the Ether locked inside of Uniswap generates a new token that represents its value, which is then relocked inside of Compound. The same Ether that is collateral for Uniswap is also collateral for Compound. I'm sorry, I'm skipping ahead here. Okay, and so you use that new Uniswap token in a Compound to act as a store of value to lend out, and you get a loan of DAI based off that collateral. But you could also do it in reverse, where you can lend that Uniswap token that receives fees into Compound and receive fees in a token that receives fees. And so now we have this store of value plus a capital asset that is being lent out and returned in fees, which is acting as a capital asset squared. And so and while this is happening, we've made 8 transactions. The Ether has gone into MakerDAO to produce DAI. That's 2 transactions. Ether and DAI are both submitted into Uniswap, which is 2 more transactions. And then what is output is another token that represents a claim on that, which is another transaction. We put that token into Compound, and a loan comes out of Compound, and all these things are burning Ether as energy in the Ethereum network. And so all this is happening at once. And so this is how Ether is acting as a capital asset, a consumable, transformable asset, and a store value asset all at the same time, because all of these things are happening all at once. And this is just one example. You can talk about any number of other DeFi or open finance applications, and you can go through the list of like, okay, here Ether is acting as a store of value, but it's also collecting fees, and it's also being staked, and it's also, and because things are super fluid, as Dan calls it in Ethereum, all of these things can happen at once. So why is this significant? Ether is the first asset in history to operate as all 3 asset types as once. Why is this neat? What does this mean? So here's the model for here's a model for the US economy. We have the store of value dollar. You have the IRS, which collects fees to pay for the security of the network. And then you have the capital asset, which is the bond market, the treasury bills. Currencies are great stores of value assets. Nation-state currencies are designed to hold wealth across time. However, they could be better at this, as many Bitcoiners will point out. Currencies are the trust vehicle for communicating and transacting value across space and time. The US dollar has been the most successful currency of all time, and it is the store of value asset that dominates the world economy. US Treasury bills are the foundation of the US bond market. The bond market is perhaps one of the greatest economic forces in the world, as it enables the market to express its trust or distrust of a government's ability to repay its debts. Bond market yields are the fundamental risk-free rates provided by the U.S. government with your store of value asset, the U.S. dollar, with a promise to return your US dollars with an extra percent in interest. The US government then uses that value to secure the US economy. Taxes are how the US government pays its debts and funds new endeavors. The IRS represents the entity that collects fees based off of economic activity to support the US economy. The taxes collected partly go to the holders of US Treasury bills, as is the revenue mechanism for paying the interest owned by T-bill holders. In theory, the US government also pays off T-bill holders via inflation of the US dollar, reducing the dollar's strength as a store of value asset, which is why crypto is cool in the first place, something we should never forget. Ether and Ethereum follow the same model. This same structure of an economy is found in Ethereum as well. However, this time it's Ether at the center of it all, and it's Ethereum as the economic system. So ETH locked in finance is the store of value Ether. Staked ETH is the capital asset, and gas is the consumable asset. So you're bringing it all together. At the heart of Ethereum is the infrastructure needed for generating an entirely new economy. This time, the financial services inside this economy are entirely run by code, completely trustless and permissionless, and is on the internet. Now that we have this new economy, we need a new money to run inside of it. If we want to retain the trustlessness and permissionlessness of the Ethereum economy, we need a trustless and permissionless currency. And the only trustless and permissionless asset in Ethereum is Ether, which brings us to Ether's role in Ethereum. Ether is bandwidth for permissionlessness. The demand for and use of Ether inside of Ethereum is a function of its demand as a permissionless money inside financial applications. There is a finite amount of Ether in Ethereum, meaning that when Ether is locked inside an application, the application is using up a part of the total sum of Ether. Applications compete for Ether collectively using a portion of all Ether in Ethereum. This is what we are calling ETH locked in DeFi, or why we think ETH locked in DeFi is important. It's also important to know that when an application like MakerDAO is using 1.3% of all Ether, and 1.3% was when I wrote this article, it's now at 2.3. There is 2.3 less Ether on the secondary market that is available for other apps. Now, if this was the US government, and there was demand for dollars and dollar price was going up because some application is you sucking up all the dollars, the federal government just prints more. But there's no printer. There's no money printer in Ethereum. That doesn't work. That's the fundamental to the value proposition of cryptocurrencies, is that as demand for an asset increases, there's no more. And so instead of new Ether being minted, the price just goes up. And so this is a reference to economic bandwidth, which I'm about to get into. And so at the time of writing, and these are old figures, I need to almost triple these. MakerDAO was using 1.35%, Compound 0.43%, DYDX 0.1%, Uniswap 0.05%. The total bandwidth of Ether that was being used by DeFi was 2.1%. I believe that number is now like 4%-ish. And the bandwidth I'm using is referring to ETH locked in DeFi, or how much ETH does this application need to serve serve its users. Right now, bandwidth usage is pretty low. There's a lot of room for application growth and further ETH capture with the current market price of ETH. However, if we want more DAI to come into existence, it's going to need to lock up more Ether to generate that permissionlessness. Each DAI, one DAI, requires $1.5 worth of Ether to support it. And if the demand for Compound loans increase, Compound will require more Ether collateral to back those loans. Same for DYDX. If Uniswap grows in volume and liquidity, it will need more Ether and more DAI to add to these liquidity pools. All of these things and all the other DeFi applications that have come into the network since writing this article, all of these things require a portion of total Ether, representing the usage of Ether as bandwidth as a permissionless currency. So how do we grow the bandwidth? At day one of the internet, the bandwidth was awful. We were sending kilobytes over the internet, and it took hours. Now we can stream Netflix on 8 different tablets in our home Wi-Fi. It's not a problem. How do we get there? How do we scale? If the old internet is all about data and the internet of value is all about value, how do we scale the new internet? Well, that's what we're about to talk about. Ether has plenty of bandwidth for the current state of Ethereum. The market cap of Ether is 20 billion at the time of writing, while total value locked in open finance is 600 million. We currently have the bandwidth we need to achieve the current needs of the users. However, Ethereum as an economy leaves much to be desired. If we want Ethereum to be the global financial platform for the internet of value, the global settlement layer for all digital assets, and we want this to be a fully permissionless, trustless settlement layer, then we need Ether to scale to larger numbers. Trusted finance and permissioned assets are welcome on Ethereum. They have their role and function in Ethereum all the same. But the real revolution is totally permissionless financial applications that operate using totally permissionless money. Anything else is a compromise. There is 1.7 trillion US dollars in circulation. If we want to host those dollars and all of its economic activity on Ethereum, Ether price needs to increase by 85 times so that we can have those dollars be represented on chain. If we want synthetic stock market assets, if we want to host the stock market's activity in a trustless and permissionless way, we need to have those assets with Ether collateral. So we need Ether price to go up by 4,000 times in order to host that value. The global monetary supply is $90 trillion. If we don't need all that money supply. It'd probably be more efficient if that money supply was reduced, maybe cut in half. But still, if we want $40 trillion of global money on Ethereum, we're going to need Ether price to go up. We're going to need a bigger ship. And Ether price going up is how we get a bigger ship. If we want to onboard the next 1 million or 1 billion users to Ethereum, Ether will have to increase in price to support the economic activity required by the permissionless and trustless financial applications that are serving this growth in people. So how will it actually scale? How will Ether price go up? Will it just magically go up automatically? Kind of, and I'll explain why. The three-way tug of war. Here's my model for understanding how Ether will appreciate. And this is the fundamental value proposition for Ether. So this is a three-way tug of war between three different components. One of the first component, in no particular order, open finance attracts ETH. Open finance applications provide products and services that require Ether lockup. Collateralization powers trustlessness, and Ether powers trustless DeFi. DeFi applications will create valuable services for Ether holders that convince them to lock up their Ether inside of the application to access the product or service. MakerDAO, Compound, DYDX, Uniswap, more useful applications, more reasons to lock up Ether. The continuation of this paragraph is the third in this series. Ethereum is an emergent structure. So if you want to continue this particular line of thought about how DeFi is this massive single structure that sucks up ETH, that is the article for you. That is the third in this series. So that's ETH. That's ETH locked in DeFi. That's this tug of war right up here. Second, again, in no particular order, the ETH stake rate. The alternative to locking your ETH in DeFi is to stake your ETH. The ETH stake rate offers the risk-free rate, or maybe the trust-free rate for Ether holders. If you believe that you can receive a better return on your ETH by staking it than you can by locking it in DeFi, then the ETH stake rate is your incentive to stake. The ETH locked in DeFi and the ETH staking will constantly be fighting over ETH. People will look at DeFi and be like, what kind of return can I get on my Ether in DeFi? And then they will compare it to the ETH stake rate. And they say, well, how much is the ETH stake rate giving? And can I beat that in DeFi or can I not? And these two incentives, these two gravitational pulls will fight over people's Ether. Notably, the more Ether that is locked in DeFi, the better the ETH stake rate is. If DeFi continually convinces people to not stake and instead supply Ether to DeFi, well, then the ETH stake rate, according to the algorithm, the issuance algorithm, is going to increase its issuance to stakers to further incentivize security. And so the more people don't stake, the more lucrative staking will be. So the more Ether that's locked in DeFi, the more lucrative staking will be. And lastly, the thing that balances everything out is the US dollar price on the secondary market. Both of the two above forces pull on the US dollar price. If DeFi is fighting for ETH and if the ETH stake rate is fighting for ETH, then there's less ETH available on the secondary market. The only mechanism that the US dollar has to generate its equal and opposite pull on the above two forces is to increase in price. The US dollar value of ETH is a representation of the cumulative forces pulled by the ETH stake rate and the products of DeFi. If DeFi and ETH staking have successfully pulled Ether off of the secondary market, then in order to get the Ether back on the secondary market, the Ether price must go up. And so you can think of this as Ether actually leaving, or you can think of the same amount of value is still on the secondary market, but there's less Ether there because the US dollar price has gone up. So maybe the market cap of Ether on the secondary market has gone from 10% of Ether, so 10 million Ether. There's 10 million Ether on the secondary market. But then Ether locked in DeFi and Ether being staked goes up, and maybe there's only 5 million Ether left on the secondary market. So that's less Ether on the secondary market. But what if Ether price went 10x? And because of that. And so there's half the amount of Ether left on the secondary market, but there is 10 times as much value on the secondary market. And so, you net those things out and the secondary market becomes really, really liquid, even when there's less Ether there, which is how Ether is going to bootstrap itself into real world money. But that's a different topic. So these things happen, which is fantastic because it means that as open finance becomes more useful, the price of Ether should scale alongside it to match the demand. The higher demand open finance generates for Ether and the better the ETH stake rate, the more these things pull on the price of ETH, which increases the bandwidth of Ether in open finance, and therefore the security mechanism that supports the open finance economy. All these things are stitched together. All these things are one single structure. They all relate to each other. And the US dollar price doesn't stand a chance. As long as DeFi continues to generate more financial applications on top of it, it's going to make the Ether stake rate more lucrative. And so you don't even have to believe in DeFi to have exposure to its growth. If you are staking your Ether as proof of stake and DeFi is providing all these products and services for other Ether holders who are not staking, so you can instead, that's just good for you because then you get the higher stake rate. And the only people that lose are the people holding dollars on the secondary market who have to up the US dollar amount to convince that Ether to come back to the secondary market. These things are going to happen automatically, and I'm looking forward to watching this. So this is the first of 3 articles that I've kind of bucketed together in my mind. It's not the only articles I'm going to read and put on the Bankless YouTube channel. So please listen to the next 2. They are linked in the show notes, and they are the continuation of this whole idea, this whole journey of defining Ether and defining Ethereum. This is just the first one. It's kind of the one that sets the foundation, however, so it's really important. So please subscribe to the Bankless YouTube channel. Please subscribe to the Bankless podcast. Give us 5-star reviews on the Bankless podcast. Follow us on Twitter. We're doing our best to shill the Bankless meme, the Bankless religion, the Bankless ideal, the Bankless lifestyle. So I hope that you consider going Bankless with me and Ryan and join us every Monday on our podcast. So thank you.